So, on this first exam, one of the things we want to know how to do is to take something from a popular song of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and even 50s, and be able to handle the kinds of sonorities that we get there, and use pop symbols to indicate what's going on. We'll use the pop symbols to label chords up above the score, but below we'll use Roman numerals. Since our pop symbols will take care of added tones and altered tones, the Roman numerals are freed up to handle just the triad. So, for instance, in measure 1 here, we've got E flat as our key, and an E flat chord to kick it off, but there's one note that's added. There's a C there. Now, that's an added sixth. I'll show that up above, like this, E flat 6. And if I wanted to show for a Roman numeral what that is, I'd have to do 1, add 6. I'd have to write out add, and then the numeral 6. But since it's already showing us that, this symbol is showing us that, the Roman numeral is free to just show us the basic chord underneath it. So, we're starting on tonic in E flat, and we've got an added 6 there. Quick review, you're going to get added tones, and you're going to get some altered tones as well. And for added tones, we've got 6 that we add, and we've got 9ths that we add. It could be a major ninth, in which case you just write 9. If it's a minor ninth, we'll write flat 9. Remember that for 6, you've got 2 options. Well, really, you've got 3. So, if it's a major sixth, you can write 6. If it's a minor sixth, always write sharp 5 for that. Minor 6, write sharp 5. The third option comes in when you've got a dominant 7th with an added 6, and in that case, we tend to write 13 instead. I don't think we'll see that. Well, we could see that later. There's an option for using a 13th in here too, so we'll get a chance to see why you might do that. What I would do as you start in here is assume that the bass note is the root, and then if it's not, you can revisit it and rethink it. But it's a good sort of rule of thumb to take the bass note as root and see if it's a good fit. If it doesn't work, then you can always revise. So in this second measure, I'd say that looks like we've got a G chord of some kind. Since we're in E flat and G is 3, the normal thing would be for that to be a minor triad, maybe with some things added. So let's see if we get G minor there. Better G, B flat D. On the downbeat, that's all we have, G, B flat D. I'm going to write a 3 down here because of that. And let's see if there's anything added up above. Well, yeah, these are added, but they can be viewed as passing tones. See the A and the C? They're on their way up to other chord tones. So kind of en route from one chord to another. That's passing motion. That makes that easy. So I'll write G minor up here and be done with it. No F, no 7th, and nothing, no other added tones. Now here we've got a new bass note, E flat, and we have an accidental. And when you see an accidental that lowers like that, you can suspect it of being a choral 7th. And that's what this is. You've got E flat, we'll assume it's the root, E flat, G, no B flat, but that's typical. We're omitting a 5th. And then we've got the 7th. So E flat, G, B flat, and D flat, and then there's an extra note as well. Do you see the C up here? That's a 6th. So here's a dominant sound, E flat, 7, but it's also got the 6th. That's when we would use a 13. Now, let's just check that out. That is if that were a minor 6, we'd need to write sharp 5 in there. That would take us in a completely different direction. But since E flat to C is a major 6, we have the option of 6 or 13. Now, when it's a dominant 7th, write 13, like so. Now that should not be E flat 7 if it were just staying within the key. We've got some chromaticism, the D flat, and that pulls us toward the A flat that follows. In other words, we've gone outside the key, and so we need a secondary dominant. This isn't a dominant in the key, it's outside it. This is 5, 7 of the next chord, which is a 4 basically. I know we've got some added things and we'll check those out. But you can see it does go where you expect. This is serving as 5 of that. You assume it's the root and check it. So A flat, C, and E flat. Good, we've got the triad. That's it. But look at the second half of this measure. The bass note continues, but up above A flat, C, and E flat, you've got a couple other notes, G and G flat. If we wanted to be really particular, we'd notice that this is a major 7th turning to a minor 7th above the root of A flat. A lot of people would go ahead and write both, but I'm just going to write the major 7 here and realize that we could treat that as a passing tone. Okay, so 4 for the whole measure, and we're adding a 7th in there. Again, this takes care of it, so I don't really have to worry about including all the detail in my Roman numeral. Let's move on to measure 4. G's in the bass. I assume it's a 3 chord. It's a G minor chord, and pretty much it is. There's just one added thing, and that's the 7th up here. You have a real choice here, though, because you could say, now wait a minute, there's an E flat. I could take that as the root and view that F sharp is embellishing it, and then some passing motion afterwards. So that's a real choice. Is F a chord tone, or is E flat a chord tone? And I'm going to go, in this case, with the F as a chord tone because of what preceded it. If this is an oops, I didn't write my A flat on there, did I? If this is an A flat chord, then this is a 7th, and it needs to resolve down by step to a chord tone. And that resolution happens here. That makes me pick F rather than E flat. If I had picked the E flat, I would have ended up with a 1 chord. Now that we've chosen to view it as a 3 chord with a 7th in there, it's still doing a tonic job. Its tonic function. We're thinking of 3 as a stand-in for a 1/6, as a substitute. So I could write already T subscript S for tonic substitute. Either way, it does the same job, but this subtle little this subtle detail of the chordal 7th resolving there makes all the difference, and it tips the balance toward calling this a 3/7 chord. Notice that the 7th ends up down here. We can view this as passing motion down to the D, so that we end up with G, B flat, D, and F by beat 3. That just sort of reinforces our sense that, hey, yeah, that was right to pick that F, because it continues until it resolves over here. Alright, so function, I want to back up now and see what are these chords doing in their broader context. The 3, kind of like this 3/7, is a stand-in for the tonic, so I can do this. This is a secondary dominant. It's pretty stable, but it doesn't introduce that many common tones. So in a way, it's still tonic. Now I know it's also doing another job, and I could really show both at the same time. It's basically tonic, and it hasn't all the way departed, but it's on its way. Okay, this shows that it's on its way. It shows that it's a dominant of this chord here. Well, think for a minute. If this 4 goes to a tonic functioning chord, it's not a predominant. We're so used to writing predominant for 4, but this one doesn't do that. It goes to a tonic function, and so we call it plagal. PG, plagal. So this phrase has plagal motion back to tonic. This really isn't a cadence, so we've got to wait all the way to here. This is really a little subphrase. And if we want to show that this 4 is subordinate, we could actually make that plagal written up above a big long T, like so. That's your call. How significant do you want to make that 4 chord appear? This makes it seem embellishing. and in a sense it is. Here it says, okay, but I want to highlight it somehow. That's really your call. Okay, now we are going to get our cadence over here, and so I'm going to fill in the fact that this is 5 to 1 at the end. We're going to start here. We've basically been sticking around tonic. Now we're going to move to a 4 chord that goes somewhere. Now you say, wait a minute, I see the notes of a 1 chord here. That's true, but it's a 1, 6, 4. And that instability means it's not a return to tonic. Remember, 6/4s are always embellishing. And so this bass motion will give me a symbol of P passing. You always look at the bass motion for a 6/4, see what its context is, and label it using the bass motion as your cue. There's another big visual cue going on here. You see these accidentals? There's some accidentals that raise notes. I'm trying to draw an arrow there to the E. Should be E flat, scale degree 1, but it's raised. It's E natural. That's important. Another one happens here. See the A? The A is natural. It should have been A flat, should have been scale degree 4. It's a raised 4, sharp 4. So in each case you've got an accidental that raises, and those should be big cues for us. We should view them as leading tones. Now we have to check it out and make sure that's really true, because some raised notes will be chordal fifths that have been raised. We can alter the fifth in that way now. So you can't just assume it, but you can make it your first guess. Alright, so let's put two items together here. We're thinking C is probably the root because it's a bass note. And then we have a leading tone. Okay, well, C, E, that looks like it should be a dominant of, if he's the leading tone, it's the dominant of F. And then we're going to get an F. Okay, great. Well, what's F in the key? It's 2. So this is some kind of 5, probably 7 of 2. Let's just check that out. C, E, G. Good, that's the triad. Do we get a 7th? Yeah, we get a B flat and we get a D flat. So we've got quite a bit of dissonance in there, a 7th and a 9th. I'm going to write the symbol in the middle here because I've run out of room up above. But I'll write C. You might be tempted to write 7, but you can just omit that and write the 9. What kind of 9th is it? Remember, if it's a minor 9th, we need to write flat 9. And this is a half step here, plus an octave. C up to D flat. And that's a flat 9. And I don't need to write the 7th, I can just write flat 9. The 7th is assumed once you have the 9th. Here we have F, A, C omitted, but that's the chordal fifth, that's normal. And then we want E flat for a 7th chord, got it. Do we have a 9th? No, we don't. But we do get a D in there. See the D right here? That D does not fit the chord. We're thinking, okay, F, A, no C, E flat, we got that, and then we've also got this D added in. Now what's the D? It is a 6th. You have to see if it's a major or minor 6. This is a major 6th. So if we have this dominant 7th, F, 7, and we have the 6, remember to choose the 13 instead of 6. So that's F, 13, 7. What's its function? Well, remember, we noticed that leading tone and said it's probably a leading tone to B flat. And in this key, B flat is 5. So this is serving as 5, 7 of 5. 2 secondary dominants in a row. 5 of 2, and then you don't get 2, but you get 5 of 5, and there's your 5. Now that's kind of a mess. We better unpack that a little bit. There's a lot of activity going on in the last couple beats of that measure. Let's check it out. So we assume that B flat is the root, and we try and grab as many of those notes up there as possible into that same chord. So let's check it out. We get a B flat There's a D over here, another B flat. So B flat, D, F, A flat, and C. Well, that's a lot there. The B flat, D, and F is the chord triad. That makes it the 5. And then the A flat is the 7th, and the C is what? Well, you got to check it out, measure it against the B flat, and notice that it's a major 9th above. So we'll write, now there is a 6th over here too, but I have a choice with that 6th. See, I could view that as an escape tone coming from here, and I prefer that. That I heard of once in a lullaby, kind of let it go as you would any escape tone. And that makes sense to hear it that way. In other words, the G is not necessarily part of the chord. If you included it, you would need to think of a 6th or a 13th added, but I'm going to treat that as embellishment, not a chord tone. Alright, so I can account for all the other notes by simply writing B flat 9. It's a major 9th. I better make that real clear. That's a B flat with a 9th added on there. And with it comes the 7. So that's a little hard to read. Let me write it over to the side just so you can see what I mean by that. B flat with a 9th. It's very tricky because this is something else. Okay? So I need to make that flat huge to make that absolutely clear. Okay. And again, I don't even really need to write that. The Roman numerals are just going to help me get to the bigger picture. Let me back up and fill in some detail in this measure and provide pop symbols, and then we'll go down and do the functions as well. There's a change, 2 changes really, in the latter half of this measure, measure 5. We've got an F added. Wait a minute, we already had an F over here. Okay, so we've got F's that we didn't account for, and we've got this C flat. It was a C, it becomes a C flat. So, first of all, this F, which is already here on beat 2, F is not part of the 4 chord. It's a 6th. So, A flat to F, that's a major 6th up. I'll say A flat is the chord, A flat major, and I need to add a 6 in there. Okay, now there's also this change. C becomes C flat. Well, that changes the quality of the chord. That makes it turn minor. You can think of it like that. Some of you might also decide to change the whole configuration of the chord and view it as a 2 chord. That's possible, and I invite you to check that out. That would be fine. That means building it off of this F as root. But again, I prefer to pick the bass note as my root and view this as just another added tone. So this is A flat minor now with an added 6. Okay, so now we want to drop down and describe the chord functions. What's the function of this 4? We already worked on this. We know that it's embellishing, so it's going to be sandwiched between 2 other chords that express some main function within the phrase model. Now it gets pretty obvious toward the end because we have a dominant and we have a tonic. That's clear. 5 of 5 leads to the dominant, so that's got to be a predominant. Don't write dominant there. It's the dominant of the dominant, but see, we're trying to get perspective on this. So that is the chord that most powerfully leads into the dominant in this whole bunch here. That is 5 of that. So I could think of it as dominant in these square brackets like that, being fairly stable. So is this, though. You know what I'd like to do is think of all of these chords as being one big precursor to the dominant, just a big setup for the dominant to come. So the 4, the minor 4, passing up to this, which is kind of like a 6 chord but chromaticized, so that it can become dominant of 2. Still not really moving on to the dominant, so we set up the 5 of 5 with its dominant, Well, that's obviously the predominant too. So all these chords, especially these two, that's the crucial thing. These two chords can serve as predominants, and they do together serve that function. Then the 1-6-4 is just passing within that. I sort of brushed across that, but what I'm saying is that this very well could have been this chord, but if you change the quality of it, if you bump up the E flat to an E natural, you create a leading tone. So it's close to being this very ambiguous 6 chord. And that makes it a little more believable to just package that in with the rest of these. I like this too, that's fine, and you could do the same here as well and show that, hey, that's a secondary dominant with square brackets around it. But again, the big picture, tonic, embellished by plagal motion, move to the predominant, go to dominant and tonic, and then moving sort of backwards into detail now. We've got some added 6 that can be written as 6 or as a 13 when you've got a dominant 7th quality. You also have a 13th here. You have some 9ths added there. We don't have altered chords in this one, but we'll see that elsewhere. So remember, when we're adding tones, we've got 6ths and we've got 9ths. 9ths can be major or minor, and you use a flat to show the minor. For 6th, if it's a minor 6th, which we'll see in a moment, in another example, if it's a minor 6, you write sharp 5. Now if it's a major 6, you've got two options. It's either 6 or 13, and the 13 is just used when you have a dominant 7th as the core of your chord. Okay.